What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be doing another hero guide, this time focusing on one of the most underrated characters in the game in Master Yoda. In my opinion, Yoda is probably one of, if not the best character on the light side, although I do hear a lot of people saying they struggle with him, which is completely fair as I used to be absolute garbage with him as well. But with a few of the tips in this video, any of you guys that are struggling with Yoda will hopefully see a bit of improvement with him, as I do think he's one of the funner characters to play once you do get the hang of him. Now, if you haven't seen my latest hero guides, then there will be a link on screen at the end of the video, as well as a card up in the top right of your screen right now, so make sure to go and check those ones out after you are done with this video. With that out of the way though, we are going to go ahead and get stuck right into it. So we're going to start off with Yoda's base stats, and like I mentioned in all of these hero guides, all of these stats have been double checked by both myself and one of my subscribers, and there will be a link in the description where you can find his Reddit post with all of these stats. Now, we both tested these in arcade, and while I'm 99% sure all of these stats do transfer over to multiplayer, just bear in mind that there is always a chance that some stats may change from arcade to multiplayer, so if you do see any stats that don't seem right, then definitely feel free to let me know down in the comment section. So first off, we're going to take a look at his base HP, and he does have a pretty decent health pool coming in at 700, although that is actually the equal lowest of all the other saber users in the game, exactly the same as Darth Maul, who we did just go over in the previous hero guide. In saying that, 700 HP is still higher than most of the other blaster users in the game, so definitely nothing too much to worry about, but just keep that in mind when you do come up against another saber user. On top of that, he does also have 250 health regen, which is up there as the equal second highest health regen of all the characters in the game so far, and so despite the slightly lower HP, he definitely has nothing to worry about when it comes to his health, especially with one of his abilities, which I will touch on in just a minute. Now, his weapon of choice is of course his little green lightsaber, and surprisingly he does actually deal some fairly decent damage, dealing 115 from the front and 130 from behind. On the downside of that though, he does also have the slowest swing speed in the entire game, swinging at just over 1 swing per second, and so because of that, his damage output per second is slightly lower even with the decent damage stats. With that being said, he will still take out a regular trooper in just under 2 seconds, and so it doesn't really make that much of a difference in Galactic Assault. However, it is noticeably slower compared to the likes of Darth Maul. As for his lunge distance and stamina pool, and they're both pretty much around the average compared to the other saber users in the game, so there's nothing too much to talk about there. Now, keep in mind these stats are tested against heroes rather than troopers, and so there is always a small chance that they could be slightly different, especially in multiplayer, but as far as I can tell, these stats do all transfer over to Galactic Assault exactly the same as they are on your screen. Now, moving on to his abilities, and he does have some really decent and well-rounded abilities, all of which can be perfect in their own situation. His L1 ability is called Unleash, and this is essentially just a force push. However, it does have a slight catch to it when you compare it to Luke's force push. Deals 110 damage without any charge at all. However, you can charge it up by holding the block button and absorbing enemy fire, which will increase the range of the ability as well as the damage output, upping it to 160 damage, which will of course one hit kill every other class than the heavy. This ability is great for clearing rooms or objectives of enemies and then taking them out with a quick swing of the saber once they have been knocked down. It is also super useful in HVV and Hero Showdown, as it acts almost like a safety mechanism by clearing any enemies before they can deal any damage. On the downside though, it can be extremely buggy, just like Luke and Obi-Wan's force pushes are, as there is always the chance it just simply won't work when it should, and so despite it being good, you do need to keep in mind that there's always the chance it will fail when you need it most. Moving on to his L1R1 ability, and this one is called Presence. Yoda instantly heals both himself and any nearby teammates, giving teammates up to 100 HP if they aren't buffed already, and giving himself an extra 200 HP, meaning his health can go up to 900, making him an absolute tank of a character. It does also break any stun locks when activated, so if you have been stunned by Iden or Phasma or pretty much anyone with a stun, activate the ability and you will actually break free plus gain your 200 HP, and so it definitely is one of the best, if not the best ability for Master Yoda. Now, not only is it great for yourself, but it also is extremely helpful for the rest of your teammates, as you can sit near an objective where your teammates have set up some defense and continue to buff them and keep them alive. If I had to pick a weakness, it'd probably be that its animation can leave you pretty vulnerable. However, it is a fairly short animation and your small hitbox should take away some pressure, so overall that is not really much of an issue at all. Moving on to the R1 ability, which is called Dash Attack, and this one is another very useful ability when used in the right situation. Just as the name suggests, this will send Yoda lunging forward swinging his lightsaber, dealing 130 damage to anyone that he hits. This does also allow for some fast movement compared to his normal speed, and so it is very handy when it comes to gaining ground on your enemies. Just like I mentioned in the Maul guide, it's always a really good tactic to strike an enemy once with your saber and then use the dash attack to deal a second blow, while also getting out of the area much quicker, meaning you're a lot less likely to take take damage and at the same time guaranteeing that you do get the kill. As for its weaknesses, to be honest, it doesn't really have any. The only one I can really think of is that it sometimes can lead to you falling off a map if you aren't paying attention, but for the most part, that's generally not really a problem, so overall this is another very handy ability. So that is it for all of his base stats and abilities. Now we're going to move on to some of the more important stuff, starting with his best star cards for Galactic Assault. Obviously, it really does come down to personal preference, so these definitely aren't the only cards that you can use, but these are just the 3 or 4 cards that I think are the most important and most well-suited cards for Galactic Assault. So the first card I'm going to recommend is his Release the Force star card, and this is of course his health on kill card, so this is by far his most important card to choose. Now, this is actually a health on ability kill card, and so this will award you with 20 HP per regular trooper kill when you use the Unleash ability, and up to 100 HP per villain kill, depending on how much you have upgraded the card. So to repeat that, just to make sure that you guys do understand, with this card equipped, if you get a kill with the Unleash ability, you'll gain back some health, rather than just gaining back health with every single kill that you get. The next card I'd recommend using is the Agility card, and this one allows you to have an extra dash attack at the cost of a slower recharge. Now, the slower recharge can be a little bit of a problem at times if you do get trigger happy with the ability, but for the most part this card will mean you can use the dash attack more often, which is definitely worth equipping the card for. The third card I'm going to recommend is his Unleashed card, and this one will make the area of effect bigger for Yoda's Unleash ability. This comes in handy when combined with his health card, as that extra bit of distance can make it a little bit easier to take out your enemies and gain back some easy HP. Now, with that being said, this card can just as easily be replaced by his Feel the Force card, which will give him up to an extra 60 HP when he uses the Presence ability, meaning he can max out his health at 960 HP. So this is definitely another great card to use if you're not much of a fan of the Extended Unleash card. Between these last 2 cards, it really was pretty hard to pick. Like I said, it does all come down to personal preference, and so the best way to figure it out is just by giving all these cards a bit of a test on your own, and then you will quickly figure out which one suits you the best. Now, like I said, these are the 3 or 4 cards that I'd personally recommend using. However, if you do disagree, then definitely feel free to let us all know down in the comments section, as there really is no right or wrong when it comes to something like choosing star cards. So now moving on to some of the best maps to choose Yoda on when you're playing Galactic Assault, and the top 3 that I've picked are Endor, Death Star and Kashyyyk. Yoda's small hitbox on Endor, paired with the ability to run around amongst the cover of the trees, is a match made in heaven, and he does even blend into the map as well, so he can be very hard to kill if you do stick close by to the trees. As for the Death Star, he's just so dominant in all the close quarters areas, and again, because of this small hitbox, he can be extremely hard to take out, so this is definitely another well-suited map for Yoda. Kashyyyk is essentially a combination of both things that I just mentioned. It has some of the features of Endor in that first phase, and then in the Juggernauts and on the Venator in the last phase is so well-suited to Yoda as well, so that's my reasoning behind why I love to pick him on Kashyyyk. Now, this doesn't mean that these are the only 3 maps that you should choose him on, and to be honest, Yoda can do pretty well on almost every single map in the game, but if I had to choose 3 maps that I could only ever play Yoda on, then these would definitely be my own personal choices. As for some maps to avoid, and to be honest, I'd actually have to say that I don't think there are any maps to avoid choosing Yoda on, so overall there aren't really any maps that you shouldn't choose him on if you do get the chance to do so. Now, as for some tips for Galactic Assault, and the main one that I would have to say is to make the most of his tiny hitbox like I mentioned before. I'm sure you all know just how hard he can be to shoot at when he's dashing around at your feet and causing a little bit of chaos, and so if you do stay on the move and stay close enough to your enemies to disorient them, you'll find yourself barely taking any damage at all. If you do get into trouble, his block is probably the best block in the game, and it will block just about anything at all. Stuff like Bosk's micro grenades, Iden's secondary fire, and even Palpatine's lightning can all be blocked by Yoda, so like I said, if you do find yourself in trouble, then you definitely have a very good safety net. Now, one tip I have for gaining back HP when you're low on health is to try and damage your enemy once with a regular saber attack or a dash strike, and then once they are hurt, you'll be able to take them out with one click of the L1 ability, rewarding a free 20 HP per kill. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that when you have hit an enemy and are just about to hit them with the Unleash ability, they will often try and roll away, which will actually cancel the damage from the Unleash ability, and so it's always a good idea to wait a second or 2 after dealing that first bit of damage, and then hitting them with it once they have stood back up from their combat role. Aside from that, Yoda is an absolute animal at playing the objective, so make sure to try and play the team role whenever you can, disarming objectives or buffing your teammates and stuff like that, because he is definitely very well suited to objective based playstyles. If you try to stick to some close quarters areas or make sure to flank when there are none, then you should have no trouble at all going on some monster kill streaks and helping your team get the win. So that is going to be it for the Galactic Assault tips. Now we're going to move on to some of the tips for the hero vs villain game mode. So starting off with the best star cards, and the first one I'm going to mention is the agility card that I mentioned earlier, as that extra dash strike can be an absolute lifesaver both on offensive and defensive sides of the game. The next card I'd recommend is the Jedi Mentor star card, and this one causes Yoda to receive less overall damage, giving the equivalent of 56 extra HP when fully maxed. Obviously you won't actually have any more than the 700 base HP, but taking less damage does ultimately do the same as having more HP does, so it will work out to be the same as if you had a health pool of 756 instead of 700, which can give you a bit more survivability in these modes. As for the third card, I definitely recommend using the Opposing the Dark Side card, which causes Yoda to deal more damage to enemy villains at up to 16% extra per hit. Now that works out to be roughly 133 damage per hit rather than 115, so again it is a fairly small change, however it does definitely add up. With both of those last two cards equipped, you'll take less damage while dealing more damage of your own, and so even though the statistical changes aren't all that much, it definitely does help the fight swing in your favour just that tiny bit extra. These are the three cards that I personally use in the hero modes, but again, that doesn't mean that these are the only three cards to use, so definitely feel free to leave your own cards down below if you do tend to disagree with my choices. Now, moving on to some tips for the hero game modes, and if I'm honest, Yoda can definitely struggle at times in these modes if you do try and play him similar to every other saber user in the game. Rather than trying to fight your enemies on your own, you should try and stick nearby your teammates whenever possible, as more of a support type role for Yoda can be extremely effective. His inability to block saber users along with his slow swing speed can cause some trouble when you come across enemy saber villains, and so it's definitely not wise to try and fight any in a one-on-one unless you absolutely have to. Obviously you can still do well even against the likes of Vader or Grievous, but it's still not a smart move to go picking fights against characters like that, as the odds definitely don't swing in your favour. Other than that, just make the most of your abilities, keep yourself and your teammates buffed, and stay near the edges to try and score some easy force push kills, and you should still definitely be able to do very well in HVV and Hero Showdown. Now in terms of some characters to watch out for in these modes, and I'd definitely have to say that Vader, Grievous and Phasma are the main characters that you do need to keep an eye on. Vader and Grievous obviously deal the most damage in the game, and so their high damage against your inability to block them definitely does not work in your favour, so they definitely need to be avoided unless you do have some teammates supporting you. As for Phasma, she's the only character that can stun you multiple times in a row, as her turret does stun at a much faster rate than anyone else in the game. Obviously you can break out of a stun with the presence ability, but you can still be stunned very quickly afterwards while your ability still won't have cooled down, at which point you will have no form of defense whatsoever, so definitely play it very careful when you're up against her and her turret. So that is going to be it for our Master Yoda Hero Guide, guys. As these ones have been going a little longer than normal, I'd love it if you guys could let me know down below what you thought of the length of the video, as like I mentioned at the start, I am still trying to figure this new format out for the best guides possible. If you did enjoy the video, then make sure to leave a like down below. Not only does it help support the channel, but it does also show me that you guys do want to see more of these updated hero guides. The next guide will hopefully be a boss hero guide, providing no other opportunities come up, so keep your eyes peeled for that over the coming days and weeks. If you are new to the channel, then definitely feel free to subscribe and make sure to turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 guides or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.